To make sure. Hello, Trailblazers all across the country. It's amazing to have you here. I'm Rufaro, the CEO of Enke, and I'm very excited to introduce Kwanda Ndoda. Kwanda is an innovation manager, strategic investor, and public innovator at DG Murray Trust in the All Children on Track portfolio. He formerly was a civil engineer by profession, but he now works in development, focusing on education and the well-being of children. We're very, very excited to have you. You are our first speaker for this 2020 Trailblazer program. And we're broadcasting live on Facebook in our Trailblazer 2020 group, as well as to our 8 hubs in Free State, Northern Cape, and Limpopo. So these are all of the different Trailblazer chapters that are participating. So welcome, Kwanda, and I'm going to hand it over straight to you.
Hi, Rufaro, and thank you to everybody out there that is listening. Thank you for being here today, and I'm honored to be part of the Trailblazers. I think young people have a great potential when it comes to nation building in South Africa, and I think that we haven't given enough attention to what young people can do. And so I thank you all for being here, and I thank you all for listening to me. And I hope you all have a good day after this, and I hope that it'll give value to you guys. So I engaged Enke through the work that I do at the DG Murray Trust, and it was through a fellowship that we have for young people in development, right? And so it's special because this year was coming said the recording has, okay. I don't know if everybody can hear that when it happens, or it's just me.
If you can keep going, I apologize for
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Is it going to happen back and forth, and I must just ignore it? Hey.
It really shouldn't. We're going to try to make sure that it doesn't happen.
Okay. Don't worry, I'll be fine.
All right.
So anyway, in the DGMT fellowship was Enke. Had 2 fellows from Enke as part of the fellowship, and so then they asked me, look, could you come talk to us? We're going to be having all of our participants come in and be starting the next chapter. Could you just come talk to us on Saturday? And I thought, yeah, that's great. And then I asked them, what would the talk be about? And they gave me 3 bullet points to work around. Said, being a young person with a dream was the first bullet point. The second one was envisioning yourself, your journey and your obstacles. So talk about envisioning yourself in a specific position, because I understand you guys are grade 10s and grade 9s all over the country. And then the third bullet point was the value of personal vision, so understanding yourself and understanding your vision and sticking to that and understanding that. So I thought, okay, that's great, because that's exactly what I love to talk about too. And the way that I like to talk about that is that I'm going to talk about my life. I'm going to talk about myself. I'm going to talk about my journey from grade 10 to where I'm at right now. And I'm hoping that in doing that, I can encapsulate all of these 3 points. And how I've structured it is that because it's going to be a 45-minute talk about, I've structured it around 3 different scenarios in my life. So at the time when I was in grade 10 and a little bit until matric, and then some time in university, and then my working life after university. And so that's how I've broken it down. And so I'm going to start at grade 10. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself so you understand what kind of student I was at grade 10. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey all the way from grade 10 until matric, but I'm going to try to be a little bit brief. I'm not going to tell you everything about me. So grade 10, let's start at the school disco, okay? So I was the kind of student that I didn't sit at the back of the classroom, right? I would sit, say, maybe in the middle. But I was very mischievous, I was always talking in class, always getting up to things, always in the passage without a pass, always, interrogating the prefects, but always on a mission, under carpet. That was me. That's the kind of student I was. So hanging out with the wrong crowd, doing those things, drinking at a young age, smoking at a young age, very much trying to get into relationships, all these things. That was definitely me at grade 10. I won't lie. I wear it on my sleeve because it's part of who I am. So that was me at grade 10. But academically, I always knew cross my T's, dot my I's, always engaging the teachers, always trying to put my best foot forward when it came to my life academically, so always trying to do well in school. So came now the school disco, so I don't know if you guys have school discos, but we used to have school discos in my high school. And then, there'd be nice music and then we'd be dancing, whatever. And, you'd have those lights, boom, bah, boom, bah, the on and off, make you look like you walking like a robot. So we had the school disco, and because I was like with this gang of friends, and I mean, I'm not blaming my friends, but that's just how it was. We'd always get up to mischief and we were always misbehaving. We got ourselves a bottle of alcohol. I think it was a bottle of whiskey. I think it was 2 keys whiskey, cheap whiskey. We got it and we drank it and we got drunk. So we're going to the school disco and we're drunk, my friends and I. Get to the school disco. So not only are we drunk at the school disco, this is in grade 10. Not only are we drunk at the school disco, I get into a fight at the school disco, right? So not only am I drunk, I also get into a fight. And now, it's those lights most that, you see something, you don't see something, you see something, you don't see something. It's just on and off and on and off. And I just remember those fists, the fist would be way over there. And then all of a sudden it's in my eye and way over there. And all of a sudden it's on my face. And I'm very embarrassed about that. I got taken home by the school principal from the disco, and I was suspended for 2 weeks from school. And I was embarrassed. The next day, my dad forced me to go to school. He said, "You've embarrassed me, you've embarrassed our family, and you're gonna go back to school. I don't care, you're not gonna nurse it, papalazi, go back to school." And so I went to school. And so when I was in high school, you had to pick subjects in grade 10, right? So you actually picked them at the end of grade 9. We wrote the CTA in grade 9, which was nationalized test that everybody had to write, almost like the matric test. And so you had to pick your subjects, and then you picked those subjects for grade 10, and those were the subjects you had, and those subjects allowed you to get into university or not into university or whatever it is that you wanted to do after matric. So I go to school in the morning, babalas. And go to the Afrikaans period, I'm just almost asleep in class, and then I go to the math period. So I was doing math higher grade in grade 10. I had aspirations to be a doctor. So this is an important detail in this particular part of the story for the first 15 minutes. My math teacher, Mrs. Rogers, was like, "You're not going to be in my class looking like this. You embarrassed all of us. You embarrassed us as a school. You're a drunk. You're never going to end up being anything. You may have potential a little bit with your academics, but sis, go home." And I went home that day, and then fast forward now to matric, okay? So I'm still in Miss Rogers' class. I'm still doing math higher grade and, doing okay academically, as I always was. That was kind of like my standard. So COFSI's, University of Free State, they were going to come to our high school to come advertise their medical faculty. So that's what sometimes universities do. They'll go to a high school and then they'll advertise themselves to the matriculants so that the cream of the crop can maybe apply to their faculty in the university. So Ngogo, it was COFSI's, University of the Free State, had come to Stutterheim, the town that I was at when I was doing high school. So we're in Mrs. Rogers' class when the announcement happens. And the way that we were gauging it in the classroom, I guess the teachers were gauging it, was that if you stood up to say, "Okay, I wanted to go listen to this presentation in the school hall from, the medical faculty of COFSI's because I've always wanted to be a doctor," they'd kind of gauge how the class reacted to you saying that you had wanted to be a doctor. So when people stood up whom we knew had always said they'd wanted to be doctors, nobody really said anything or batted an eye. It was fine. They could all go. But when I stood up, and I mean, my friends and everybody in class knew that I'd had aspirations to be a doctor, so they didn't really mind. But Mrs. Rogers, my math teacher, the one that had kicked me out when I was drunk in the morning, rightfully so, I mean, I agree. She was shocked. She said, you think that you can go be a doctor? Oh, whose doctor are you gonna be? Because you're a drunk, remember. But then, I mean, my classmates backed me up, luckily, because I mean, everybody knew that I did really have aspirations to be a doctor, and I went to that presentation. I mean, of course, I didn't become a doctor in the end. I became something else. But the reason that's important for that part of the story is because those 3 points, being a young person with a dream, envisioning yourself, the value of your personal vision. That time when Mrs. Rogers said those things to me, I could have coiled up and thought, oof, but I really can't be a doctor. Well, that one mistake that I made defined me. That could have happened to me. I could have coiled up and maybe, and things maybe would have been different for me. But that day I stood up for myself and I was like, yo, everybody knows that I've always wanted to be a doctor and I have the marks to kind of prove it. Yes, I did make a mistake, but look, I believe in myself. This is my vision for myself, and I think that I can achieve it. Yes, I'm not perfect. I mean, I'm far from perfect, and I definitely won't be a prefect. And some of you here, in grade 10 and grade 9, probably get up to mischief. Some of you smoke, some of you drink, and some of you maybe have been told that you won't end up being anything, and that you're really just a lot of trouble. And maybe you are, but you can achieve your goals if you set them properly. If you do really want to get to something, you can. It doesn't matter what you've done until now. What matters is what you do from now going forward. So that was the first 15 minutes. That was me in grade 10 in matric, giving you a little bit about my personality and the context of my life. So fast forward to matric. I'm in matric, and mind you, important factor also, when I was in matric, to prove to myself and everybody around me that I really wanted to become a doctor. Well, at that point, let me clarify a little bit. The reason why I thought that I wouldn't become a doctor was because when you apply for medicine, if you really want to get in, you probably have to apply with your grade 11 marks, because that's how good you have to be. You have to apply with it because there's a lot of people that apply to study medicine, and as a kind of cancellation mechanism or as a sifting mechanism, universities don't just want really good academics, but they also want good extramural activities. So you have to be a prefect, you have to have been doing all of these other things. And we all know, okay, my extramural activities was chasing girls and going to taverns. So I wasn't going to have, very good chances being a doctor, but I used those points that you have in the system in your prospectus that tell you how many points you need to go for a specific course in university. And I looked at those points and I thought, oh, what's higher than that? And chemical engineering was higher than that. And I thought, you know what? I'll prove to Mrs. Rogers that I can be something better than a doctor, and I'll go do that. And that's why I applied to go do engineering. So now we're at the second part of my story and my narrative, where I'm going to talk about the time when I was in university and the trials and tribulations there, and how my personal vision came and was tested once again, and how I had to overcome those obstacles. So fast forward to matric. My matric year, I dedicate to working hard and getting the marks I require to get into chemical engineering, because it's very difficult getting in. And I didn't smoke that year with my friends, so I wasn't hanging out in corners doing all of these things. I wasn't chasing girls. I'm being very frank here about my life, because I'm hoping that you will ask me frank questions, and that the stories that I'm telling you about myself can really be applied to your life, because if you're honest with yourself, you know how you are. So in matric, I sacrificed, wasn't drinking, wasn't smoking, wasn't hanging out with friends. Did I have a girlfriend in matric? I mean, I don't really quite remember, but I mean, I was just at home studying almost every single day, because I had this goal. I had to get into this course, because if I didn't, then Mrs. Rogers was right? So I decided, okay, I'd apply for chemical engineering, applied to Stellenbosch, applied to UCT, wanted to go to Rhodes, but they didn't have engineering or medicine. So fast forward to the end of matric, say about January, when the matric results come out, I get an opportunity to go to Walter Sisulu University, where I had applied for medicine. I mean, I didn't really want to go to Walter Sisulu University. I was quite set in Stellenbosch or UCT, but my parents were like, okay, here's an opportunity. You could get a bursary, so go do this interview. And then I had to take a taxi from Stutterheim to King Williamstown to Episho, and then from Episho, I was going to hitchhike to Mthatha. On my way, I'd actually gotten transport hitchhiking to Mthatha. On my way, I got a phone call that said, okay, no, you actually have a bursary to go to Stellenbosch. It wasn't a comprehensive one, just a small one. You can come in, we pay for some of your fees, and we pay for your registration. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm fine, I'm set. And I didn't go for the interview at Walter Sisulu University. So there's two reasons for that. The one reason is that I knew that I would struggle to be in a university where there'd be a lot of protests. I mean, in hindsight, there were protests in all universities eventually, but I knew that I didn't want to have to go through that, because I don't want to have to choose between a cause and choosing between, going and studying or attending class or whatever. So I knew I didn't want to do that. And I turned back and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Stellenbosch. Went to Stellenbosch. It was amazing. Had an amazing first year. Okay, it was daunting being in this town that didn't know it was part of South Africa. I won't lie. It is quite an isolated town, very Afrikaans. Coming from a town like Stutterheim, when I went to Stellenbosch, the first thing I did, you had to buy a padlock, because when you get into university and you're going to stay at res, you need to get a padlock for your cupboard. So I'm going to go buy a padlock, and I get to the shop and this man addresses me in Afrikaans, and I'm like, is he talking to somebody behind me in the queue? How can this man just address me in Afrikaans? But I mean, I got used to the life in Stellenbosch. I didn't really mind so much because I made great friends when I did my first year. It was great. I passed all my modules in my first year of engineering in Stellenbosch. I made great friends with three of us, three black guys. We were all Xhosa guys. One guy was from Gugulethu in Cape Town. One guy was from Port Elizabeth. And we were all doing first year together. And I mean, we had some fantastic times. I mean, first year, it was just great. I really cannot complain. Second year, we were still having a great time. Too great a time, I might add, because I then had to drop out because I failed almost all my modules. I think I passed maybe one module in my first semester of second year. And my friends whom I was partying with, they passed, I mean, one of them didn't pass so great, but I mean, they passed and they were able to continue, excuse me. But I had to drop out of university. So that was the second tribulation, which was huge, man. I mean, the girlfriend I had in matric, she had come down to CPUT. So it was great. In first year, we were seeing each other. I mean, my life was really great until second year happened, and it was all just a blur. Now, I'd broken up with her. I had failed all of my modules, and things were just looking so bleak. So I dropped out of university. I canceled my registration at the university, and I was back home in Stutterheim, depressed. This was in 2009. So I'm at home depressed, barely getting out of bed, not really talking to anyone, very, very low point in my life. And I knew that I needed to get a job, right? I had an aunt in PE. So eventually, when I did get out of my depressive slump, I decided, okay, let me go to PE, because there's a lot more shops in PE, and there's malls and different places where I can send my CV. So I'm going to go there and I'm going to get a job, and that's how I'll salvage the rest of my year. I'll apply to other universities and it'll be okay. I'll press reset and I'll be fine next year. So I go and I live with my aunt for a little bit in PE. Dropped out at about June after those exams, June, July, went to go fetch my stuff in Stellenbosch. Say about August, September, I go to PE to go stay with my aunt and look for a job. Sending out these CVs, Jonga, I'm enthusiastic. Every shop I can go into, I'm like, hey, how you doing, my man? I'm here, I'm available. I can work for you, whatever you need me to do. I was even telling people I'd work for free, just let me do something. Just let me be here and let me do something. But, rejection, left, right, and center. And it was just so demeaning. That was the first time I had to really go out and look for work. I implore you, go try it. It'll change your perspective. And I was just trying to find work and I couldn't find work, and I was becoming frustrated. And I could see my aunt was becoming frustrated because my enthusiasm for looking for work was waning. So instead of waking up in the morning like I did in the beginning when I got to PE, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd go print CVs, and then I'd send them out, and I'd come back at like 5 when she came back from work. But then I began waking up a little bit later, and I would wake up and I'd maybe go wash the dishes, and I'd sweep the floor, and I'd dust around, And one day she just was like, hey, did you come here to look for a job or did you come here to clean? Because I can get a helper. And so then we began to fight, and I realized that actually it just wasn't working. And I went back home to start. When I got to start, I should have known that, the sense of community would have helped me get a job, because the first place I went to go look for a job at in Start was the local Spar, the supermarket. I went there, I walked in, and I went to the owner, whom I didn't know him by name, but I knew who he was. So I walked up to him and I told him, look, man, I've dropped out, been trying to look for a job. Can you, just let me help out? You don't even have to pay me. I just need to be busy. And he gave me a job right there on the spot. He gave me a job as a cashier, but really you could do anything in the shop, anything, anywhere where you were needed. And that was such an important experience for me because it was my first time being employed. And of course, I had very, very much older colleagues who were going to be cashiers for a very long time. Some of them had already been cashiers for a very long time. And I was there, in my head, psychologically, I was there for a short stint. I would be there and I would go back to my life as a student. But I mean, I had a great time there. If you have a store in your local neighborhood, even go now you're in grade 9 or grade 10, go ask to go work there, even if you work for free. I'm telling you, the experience that you get there is invaluable. And when you put it on your CV that you were working in grade 10 or grade 9, it sets you above everybody else, because that means that you were used to a lot of things quite early. It's quite a transition, beginning to work anywhere else. So I'm working at Spa. The reason why this story is important is because when I was working at Spa, and I'm waiting now for, basically, I'm applying to university. I'm sorry, I've got things on my computer. I'm applying to university, and I'm basically just waiting for this year to end. And the advantage to actually discontinuing my studies was that in Stellenbosch, your first year of engineering is a general year of engineering. And so when I come back, I can just be in second year. But my conundrum was that I needed to understand which engineering discipline I was now going to go into. I could either go back to chemical engineering and maybe get my bum whooped again, or I could buckle down and really work hard and get through it, even though I knew it was very difficult, or I could try something else, try something different. And this is where you believing in yourself and believing in your dream has to also engage the environment. You have to know what kind of environment you're in. You have to know what you're working in. You have to know what's in demand. You have to know what it is that you want, very, very immediate. And you have to know the ways in which you could do that. So about me, I knew that I wanted to be independent, because I knew that my family can't really afford for me to be in university. So I needed to get a bursary. So that's one thing I knew when I was working at Spa. I also knew that I probably can't go back and do chemical engineering because it was far too difficult. And if I was going to do chemical engineering, I would have to transform my life miraculously. I would have to find Jesus very quickly and just buckle down and work and just be the most disciplined person in the world. I knew that in my mind, maybe I would not be able to do that. So then I decided, okay, I would do the one form of engineering that I actually was not interested in at all, and that was civil engineering. I knew that I could do that because I thought about the environment. I thought, okay, you know what? Legislature says that an organization, particularly if it's a consultancy or contractors, but in the civil engineering discipline, as well as many other businesses, they have to adhere to BEE compliance. And what BEE compliance means is that if you're a Black person and you have a professional qualification, so that's accounting, engineering, those kind. If you have that, then that organization can fare well when they have to tender for government work if they have good BEE points, and they'll have those BEE points if you're on their payroll. So you can be an asset to a business if you have a professional qualification. That's how the legislature is looking right now. So I thought, oh, okay, let me go try and do civil engineering, even though I don't actually like it. Let me go and do it because it'll increase my chances of getting a bursary, because there are so many contracting companies, and it increases my chances also because of the different kind of contracting companies you have and the different kinds of consultancies that you have. And they'll probably be more lenient with the kinds of marks that you need for you to get a bursary. Whereas if I try to go get a bursary from USASOL, somewhere SASOL is going to want a 60% aggregate, and my marks are dlaga. My marks have been eaten by a dog. I just come from dropping out, right? So I had to contextualize my situation so that I could maximize the opportunities that I could avail to myself. So working as a cashier, believe you me, one customer that came about, I began just speaking to him because I would always kind of market myself to customers, because I was like, one of these customers is going to bite. And one of these customers is going to work for an organization and give me a bursaries. One of them has to. I'm going to charm the pants out of these customers. I'm going to take their bags into their car as much as I can. If it's not too full, if there isn't a long queue, but I'm going to be the best cashier they've ever seen in their life. And they're going to say, ooh, you shouldn't be a cashier. You should be something else. So that was my plan. And I eventually did meet someone miraculously who was an engineer. He did have some sort of connection. I think his wife was a teacher at Statham High School, maybe back in the day. And maybe that was the conversation point that I hooked him on. But eventually my conversations with this guy and trading email addresses and just keeping communication with him led to me eventually down the line getting a bursary with a contracting company when I did eventually come back to Stellenbosch and study civil engineering, you know? So believing in myself and believing that that would happen, as miraculous as it sounds and as crazy as it sounds, it did eventually happen because I was like, somebody is going to bite something somewhere, and it's going to lead to something. And I mean, look, it was happening at a knife's edge. I remember the time I went for an interview for a bursary. In the end, the organization, it was probably 3 organizations down the line, you know, one organization, you know, cascading this me as a problem to the next organization, to the next organization. It was like on the last Friday before you can, you know, the registrations will close. I had run out of money. I had moved into a place where I didn't know how I would pay rent that month. And I was ready to not pay rent and come back to Starterline, but I was ready to press the reset button. But miraculously, I got that bursary and I was able to work for that organization as a student, but they paid for my fees. And eventually I had to work for them when I completed my studies. So that was a blessing. But it, you know, I had to dream, I had to believe, I had to understand my environment, one, so that I could maximize opportunities that were available. And that came to understanding that I have to sacrifice. So I can't go do electrical engineering or, you know, another kind of engineering. I have to go do civil engineering because maybe I can come across a contracting company. They may not be too strict about the kind of students that they take into their bursary program. And that's exactly what happened, you know? So uh, why did I drink when I was not allowed to? Because I was breaking rules, you know. That's the kind of crowd I was hanging with. And I think the way that I justified it in my head was that if I can do well in my studies, then why can't I drink? Because I think that you shouldn't drink if you can't do well in your studies. If what I'm supposed to do is be a good student, and I am being a good student, then, you know, let me gallivant and do whatever I liked. I liked things. I liked things, but that was part of my character. And, you know, sometimes you have to kind of be honest with yourself so you can really assess things properly. So that was the second 15 minutes, trials and tribulations in university, dropping out, having to overcome that depression and knowing that, you know, things will be okay, you know. And I think one of the most catalytic points of that was my dad telling me, you know, get out of bed, you know, you can't be depressed forever. Okay, I'll answer when I'm done. The questions that are coming up in the chat. So I think one of the most catalytic points was my dad coming up to me and saying, "Yo, you can't just be depressed the whole time, psst, bro. You're better than this." And he left. And you know, and that's how he said it. He wasn't chastising. It wasn't a long chat. It was more of a, "Ooh, I can go. I thought you're better than this." And he left. And I was like, I am better than that." And I got up and I did the things that had made the pot to be done. You know. So okay, the last 15 minutes. I'm going to talk a little bit about my professional life, and you know, obviously, I'm not an engineer right now, so those changes and you know, and basically the transition. So I'm hoping that the analogy kind of goes from high school to university to working life, and I'm hoping you can use my scenarios and my experiences to contextualize your situations, the decisions that you make with you know, your trials and tribulations, because trust me, there will be some. So I get this opportunity. Obviously, I'm grateful to work for this contracting company. I go work for them. They station me in Bloemfontein. By the way, in my time as a student working for this contracting company, I knew that I definitely did not want to continue working for them. Besides knowing that I wouldn't be a civil engineer forever, I'd at least thought that, you know what, I'll get the degree. It's a good degree to have. Can't lie, I know. And it's still a good institution to get the degree from. I'll go and I'll work my time off that I owe this contracting company. I'll save up some money, and then I'll go do something else after about 4 or 5 years. So I had already made that decision when, you know, as a student and working during the holidays for the contracting company that I had a bursary with. So I go work for them, stationed there in Bloemfontein. I don't enjoy it at all. Maybe it was a mindset thing, you know. I think in hindsight, I should have challenged myself to make the best of that situation and save more money. Definitely, I should have saved more money, and I would have been better off. But I was very frustrated by that work. Lots of trials and tribulations there. I didn't like the way that the white contractors would talk to the black laborers. It did make them work harder and faster, but it really bothered me, and I couldn't talk to my team that way because I just couldn't. Okay, I just couldn't. I mean, I'd get into fights with my boss because he would say, "You're an idealist. You're trying to do things in a certain kind of way, and that's not how it works. And we're trying to make money, and da, 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 da." So it wasn't working at all. Luckily, I had made some connection with one of the technical directors at a consultancy, one of the big consultancies actually that I wanted to work for here in Cape Town when I was defending my thesis. So he'd liked the way I defended my thesis and said, "Look, if you do want to come through and work for us over here," actually he was offering me a bursary to do a master's, but I said I couldn't because I had this obligation to work for this contracting company. So, but I still kept contact with them, even though I had not taken them up on the offer to do a master's. So eventually I cut my losses with the contracting company, which actually was, that's a story for another day. I cut my losses there and I came to come work for the consulting company here in Cape Town because my girlfriend at the time was also here in Cape Town. And I was like, and all of my friends were here in Cape Town. And I wasn't enjoying myself in Bloemfontein, and I think your mindset determines how good a person you are and what influence you have on other people around you. And so because I felt like I was deteriorating in terms of my mindset in Bloemfontein, I felt like I couldn't keep up with that job. Even though I owed them money, I knew that I wasn't becoming a better person. I knew that I wasn't becoming a better person to the people around me. And I knew that the environment of construction was not, for my character, it wasn't helping me at all. And remember, Mos, I've got this bit of a lost scope character a little bit, even though I can keep things together. I've got this affinity of a naughtiness, if you will. And just being on site just wasn't helping me at all. So I decided, let me cut my losses and come to Cape Town. Came to Cape Town and it was great. Worked as an engineer for a long time. Enjoyed my job, I'd say, for the most part. But then again, it just wasn't enough, I think the place where I wanted to do medicine, excuse me, I just have a little bit of gas in my chest. The place in me that wanted to do medicine, I think, is a place that was always just benevolent and wanted to help. And I think that I couldn't really fulfill that part of my life when I was working as an engineer, because, you're working in some office, in some cubicle, and you're designing things, but you never get to meet the people that you're designing this infrastructure for. You never even really get to be part of the public participation process, which is where, a consultancy will get the input of the of the community in which they're building the infrastructure for, where they'll be talking to councillors, lay people, and basically just general people in that community. So there was just so little interaction with just what I felt was my people. And I was always that guy complaining in the office just about general things, man, because, corporate South Africa is also just a story for another day. But I knew that I didn't like it. But it was okay. I mean, I enjoyed my job somewhat, but I didn't like it. I definitely was not 100% fulfilled. And sometimes I would take leave when I wasn't sick, but I just really just couldn't face going to the office. I was just like, yeah, I just cannot go deal with those people today. I don't want to go talk to them. I don't want to be around them. And that's how it was. And I mean, for my part, that was a bit of a weakness on my part. I'll admit to that. But I also knew myself enough to know that, look, I'm just really not happy here. And I don't feel like I'm being heard, and I don't feel like I'm building myself. And it's making me sad being there. And I know that I have a lot to offer, but I'm not able to offer in the way that things are right now. And things have to change for me somehow. But I didn't quit my job, without an alternative solution. So eventually, when an opportunity did come up to come work for the organization I'm with now, the DG Murray Trust, which happened quite serendipitously. I mean, it happened quite, it was just the moons and the stars aligning and something miraculous happening, and me taking a chance on myself and doing something that I had absolutely no expertise in, except knowing that I had a benevolent nature and wanted to do something that impacted more than what I was doing at the time, which was working in the consulting world. So I took this work up, which was basically being an innovation manager at the DG Murray Trust. And my work now is so different from the work that I was doing when I was working as a consultant. Typically, when I was working as a consultant, we do, conceptual designs when we begin to speak with client about whatever infrastructure they want. And then eventually we'd get to a detailed design and we'd work as a team. But we'd never get to really meet the client. The head engineers, the chief engineers would meet the client. And we never got to, as I said before, we never got to meet the people that would use the infrastructure. There was none of that. It was just you in your cubicle, getting the thing done, putting in your timesheet at the end of the week to say what you're working on that week, and that was it. This new job was very relational. Um, it was about exploring people's potential, and it's an endowment where we dispense funds to civil society, but we basically have to motivate to give those funds to whatever organization in civil society. An analogy I can use to how we work is how the banking system works. So in banking, you'll have a relationship manager, and the relationship manager will go out and they'll find people that want to start hotels, that want to open up flats or whatever that may be. I'm sorry, I just want to plug in my charger quickly so that I don't switch off here. So relationship managers will do all of those things, and then they'll come back with a preposition, and they'll go to the credit managers within the organization and they'll say, hey, Mr. Credit Manager, I've got this guy, he wants to build a block of flats, he wants to build a hotel, and can we give him some money as, say, Nedbank or FNB or whatever? Can we give him some credit so that he can do this thing? And that's basically what we do at the DG Murray Trust, except we don't look at the bottom line. We don't look at profit as the bottom line, but we look at the potential benefit that the beneficiaries of that organization will experience from that. And so typically we will work with organizations that work with parents, to better the environment that children grow up in, or we'll work with organizations that work with children to, to give an edge to their training so that they can provide a lot more stimulation to their children. We like to really use, how can I say, evidence-driven programs. And we also try to run a reading campaign because we think children should be able to read by the time they go to grade 1. The way that you consume information is the way in which you'll be able to navigate the world, essentially. And if you have the ability to navigate information well, you will never really be in trouble, when it comes to navigating the world, because you'll always be able to know the leading trends and things. You'll be able to know the narratives about things. You'll always be able to contextualize your environment and be able to maximize your opportunities if you're able to read and navigate information. So then I made the leap and I left the consulting world to come work in this job. And there's a lot of things that happen with that. It may be less money in the long run by the time I'm 60, because engineers do get paid a lot of money. At least by the time they're old men, they definitely get paid a lot of money. And I'm not sure what life will be like in the world that I'm in now at 60. It's a very precarious world. It's a world of funding. I'm very fortunate that I work for an endowment and not for an organization that has to rely on funding from an endowment, because things can change very quickly. COVID has made things change very quickly for organizations. Although I know that definitely the development world is definitely where I want to be, because in your life, whatever occupation you guys choose when you guys make these decisions, the work that you do has to be work that you think of any day. Like I'm doing my work now at 1 o'clock on a weekend, and I woke up early and I went and I ran and I jogged so I could be in the mindset to do this work now at 1 o'clock. So it's important to me is what I'm saying. Outside of KPIs, outside of milestones for my parents, outside of impressing people or whatever the case may be, for me personally, this is important and I'm invested in it. And so you have to make sure that the work that you do and your occupation is definitely aligned to that, because in that way it makes it sustainable and it makes you really stick to your guns in times where you are questioning your strategy. And that's important to have because things won't always be clear and you won't always be able to navigate information in the way that you want. But you need to at least have the grit and the belief in yourself and the pain overcome the pain threshold of what may look like failure. But if you endure and you believe in yourself, then you can still always pull it together in the end, you know? And so I'm hoping I really covered the 3 points of being a young person with a dream and having a vision for yourself and the value of a personal vision. I'll take any questions now, I think, after the 45 minutes. And I hope that my vulnerability can, you know, be used by you guys positively.
Thank you so much, Kwanda. I think it's so important that I think often when we have speakers, when people think of speakers, they're like, they're not going to get a real story. Do you know what I mean? And I do feel that your vulnerability and sharing your real experience as a young person, that I think everybody's like, what? No ways. There's no way that somebody like this, you know, who Enke would bring would have the story. And it's so powerful. I love your journey. Thank you so much for sharing that journey. We do have questions. So the way that the questions are going to work is we have a WhatsApp chat going, so we've received some of the questions preemptively. We're not going to go directly live to the areas. It's just from a technical perspective, it's a little bit challenging for us to do that for now. But I might try to work out how to throw live to others. But I'm just going to ask the questions. I will mention the name and the location and the name of the trailblazer who's asked the question. Give you a little bit of time to answer. And we have you for about 10 more minutes, and then we'll wrap up. Okay. So there's two questions that are coming from our Makabeng hub in Limpopo. So this is a question from Morongwa, which is, why did you leave school? She understands, you know, failing to the story and the lesson that failing isn't fatal. It's just courage for someone to continue with great effort. But just wanting to know a little bit more about your thinking when you decided to take a break from studies. Sorry, you're still on mute.
Unmute. Okay, no, it's fine. The host had to allow me to unmute. Thank you for that question. So it's very intriguing how it happened. You know, it wasn't actually my decision to drop out. I didn't really want to drop out, but the course convener suggested one that I drop out. And then he spoke to my dad, or there was a letter that they had written, I think, suggesting that. And then my dad was like, yo, maybe you should drop out. You know, this is pretty bad. Just drop out, press reset. If you go back now, you know, you won't really feel the gravity of, I think, what has happened here. And I didn't really want to, but I was like, you know, actually, maybe you're right. One, chemical engineering is not a joke. So I knew that I'm going to get my ass whipped if I go back. That is for sure. No matter how hard I work, I know that, I mean, the next 6 months is going to be really difficult. And because of my mindset at the time, I guess I knew that, or at least I was wary that it would take a miraculous change in my life and my discipline, most of all, for me to be able to go back and then just undo what had happened. And I wasn't sure, I didn't have a plan of how that would happen. So I wasn't confident in taking that route and in saying, because I had the option to say, I'm gonna go back to school, but I just wasn't confident in my strategy for going back. So then I decided if I don't really have a confident strategy, and I was half depressed, and I didn't really want to go back to Cape Town where I just broken up with my girlfriend also, maybe that was a factor, and I decided, you know what, okay, maybe let me just drop out.
Great. A few questions around, I think the first one, let's go with a question also from the Makabeng Hub, which is, how did you get back to your senses and stop smoking and drinking? I think I would almost want to reframe that a little bit, is that, what are your thoughts on kind of the smoking and drinking and how it's perceived for young people as well? So I think I'd add on to that a little bit as well.
Sure, thank you for that question. And I really thought long and hard about whether I would include that as part of my talk, but then I thought if I didn't, it would change a big texture of the story. And I know that a lot of you there, grade nines and grade tens, are drinking and smoking. Every high school has them, and what I would say is anything that happens, just make sure that you get if your marks are okay. I mean, I think I still stand by my credo from when I was younger. Get your marks together. When you get your marks together, you can really make an argument for yourself for whatever it is that you do. Get your marks together, put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to say, I want to drink, I want to party, I want to stay out late, the only reason your parents are saying that they don't want you to do that is because, one, it's dangerous. So the danger will always be there. That won't change. But they're saying don't do those things because they think that those things will lead you astray. And then you won't be able to get the good marks and you won't be able to have the opportunities that come with a good education. And so and the relationship that I have with my parents is that even though I did drink and smoke, I would also sit in my bed sometimes and read a whole novel. I would also sit sometimes and read. So I read a lot. So I think that for them, and because every time I brought home a school report, it was always the worst that it would be is maybe some C's, but there'd always be B's, there'd always be some A's, and they would never get a letter saying, your child is struggling with this concept or your child is whatever, whatever, whatever. I'd go to the library, I'd pick out books, I'd come back, I'd pick out books for my parents sometimes, I'd pick out books for my sister. So I don't think that we're ever worried about my academics. And I think that that's what gave me the leverage in myself psychologically to want to do those things, maybe, or maybe to think that I have a footing or justification to do those things. I admit that that was the wrong thinking because it was 50-50. I was in some dangerous situations that I shouldn't have been in that could have gone the wrong way. And I wouldn't be sitting here having this speech now, even with my academic record or whatever it is. So I'm not saying that one should do that. I'm saying that those were my trials and tribulations. And I got through them, luckily, because I was always on a good standing academically. So that's the only advice I can give you. But in terms of those things happening, I mean, they're around us, those things. They're substances and they're around us, and we see people consuming them. And I, I wouldn't want to stand on a pedestal and say people shouldn't partake in those things because I have no power to actually stop you. But I would say, if you do want to partake in those things, just make sure that the important thing is that you get your studies together. The important thing is that if anybody needs to come check on you, you can put together a good matric certificate and say, good matric certificate, degree qualification, or I mean, it doesn't even have to be a degree. It can be, here's my trade, but you have to be able to say to whoever doesn't believe in you, this is what I can do. So even if I'm doing whatever substance, whatever, this is what I can do, because I don't know if there's a way or a quick fix solution to the substance problem that we have in this country, because we have a lot of issues in this country. But get your studies together. Whatever you are, if there's one indicator that can, in South Africa right now, for me, my belief is that there's one indicator that'll show the difference between the haves and the have-nots, that is the ability to decipher information and your education standard.
Thank you for that. And I think there's such a big and important story as well there, and lesson there, that you're not just one thing, right? That just because you're using these substances doesn't mean that you can't also be a good student, doesn't mean that you can't decide not to do that anymore. It doesn't mean, do you know what I mean? And I think it's a really great takeaway, and also for us not to judge others and also see others as being one thing. I think it's a really important thing when we talk, and if you all remember about the iceberg, and that just what you see at the surface isn't everything that's there, that there's a lot more below the surface, and work on what is below the surface and bringing it forward. I'm going
And I
to
mean, Rufaro, I'm sorry, if I could just add a small piece to that. It's also a matter of, exactly, you're not one thing. Just because you go through certain things doesn't mean that you can't transform yourself. So it's not about what you've done until now, it's about what you can do from now.
Oh, I like that. I think that deserves some clicks. It's not what you did up to now, it's what you've done, what you're going to do from now. I like that. slightly different tactic. I know there's lots of questions coming in, but I'm going to take one from the Paris Hub, which is during your depression phase, did you have any support? And if so, how did that help? Or where did you find it?
So I think at home, because I was always this guy that was almost doing his own thing, I was very independent from a very early age. Um, and I mean, but that's, I guess, a story for another day. But I got my independence very early, and people kind of left me to my own devices. And so when I came home depressed, I was kind of left to sit in my room, and I would stack up a whole lot of books so that if anybody walked in, they would just either think I'm reading, or I would actually be reading or pretending to read. And I just wanted to be left alone, until the time my dad just walked in and just was like, oh, I just didn't expect, I didn't expect to be teased. And I think maybe that was him being very, very smart in how he approached that, because he wasn't chastising me, and he wasn't saying you're a failure, and he didn't say, I don't believe in you, or I told you so, or we knew that this would happen. I mean, because he could have said all of those things, because I did come home drunk sometimes. I was that guy where, one might even think was tethering on that level. So he could have said, yeah, told you so, but he didn't. He was like, yo, bro, I know that you better than this. So, you're gonna have to get out of bed and do something, maybe go get a job or something. And then he didn't even wait for me to respond. He just walked out. And then I was like, you know what, actually, you're right. What am I doing sitting here crying? I'm gonna run out of time. And that's when I had to put a plan together.
Another question, which is from the Mamelodi Hub, Bocanyo Diposa. His question is, how did you deal with the pressure of your peers being at varsity, doing what they were doing, and when you had decided to take a break or were not kind of doing the things at their level? How did you feel, and how did you overcome that?
Yo, Jonga, that time was not a nice time. That was not easy. I mean, there were things that we'd planned, some things that they did without me. When I came back, they had had a big fight. My two friends that I talked about, my two best friends at the time, they had a big fight and they weren't talking. So then I had to pick sides when I came back. So me not being there, I did have great FOMO, but I was very grateful to have that job at Spa, because maybe it was also because of the character that I am. I had fun working there. I really enjoyed it. And I learned a lot about, human interaction. And I still, to this day, because some of them still work there to this day, for, 12 years on. And I still go in there and go, greet and all of that. So I think working there made me much happier just in general. And it gave me something to do for the whole day, so I wouldn't be thinking about my friends in university.
Thanks. So I'm going to take a question that is a combination of two. So it's two questions. One is from the Frida Fort Hub, coming from Koto Matsidiso. And there's also one coming from the Viljoenskroon Hub, but they're kind of related. So I think the first one is, what are the challenges you faced, and what motivated you to carry on pursuing your dreams, especially when it felt hopeless? And building on that is, what would you advise a young person? What should they remember when faced with challenges?
So the first one was, can you please just read the first one back to me again? Both, actually, if you can, Rufaro.
Sure. So what motivated you to carry on pursuing your dreams under under hopeless situations? And what is one thing a young person, or that you would advise a young person to remember when faced with challenges?
So I think one thing that what my dad said to me when he walked in and he just walked out was that I knew that I had capacity, you know? So I expected better for myself. I think the life I live now, I would have expected no less of myself. Um, I carried myself to that standard. And I think maybe it's something that I had even academically from a young age as a student. I think reading early maybe had helped me with that, because School became easier because I had I liked reading, I enjoyed reading. So then school became easier because when somebody else might see reading as a task, I was just like, okay, well, I just have to read this. So reading became nice, and I think that gave me a certain confidence. And I think when you're at a certain level in class, and I think that's the danger of schooling too, that when you're at a certain level in class, it builds up your confidence in that entire 12 years, while for some people it beats the living daylights out of their confidence by the time they're done with the education system. So I think with me, I was lucky because I was okay in the education system, that I was confident at that time. So when I was told that I will just get up and go do something, I was like, actually, I could actually just do whatever I want. You know, I could go be a lawyer. I applied to go be a lawyer. And then I was like, you know what? I could also go back and go be an engineer. Actually, this isn't so bad. This is actually some time where I can just sit and think about these things and really recalibrate myself and see what I really want to do. And I've got all this experience now, having had my first year and, you know, working. So I can make a really better decision than I made when I was in matric. So I told myself those things. Plus, I knew that because I like to consume information, I will find something. And so there was just that belief that I had that something is going to happen because I must, I guess.
I know it's like the time is up. Can I ask you two more questions?
I can stay for longer.
Great.
I'm not pressed for time.
Thank you so much, Kwanda. So this one is from the Frida Fort Hub from Neo Mohotsi. And he says in your description, it says that you are a strategic investor. So as a young entrepreneur who's just started a business, what would you advise him to invest in? Because he wants to explore that world of investments.
So that's a typo. DGMT is a strategic investor. And I'm an innovation manager for this philanthropic organization that I say label themselves strategic investors because they're investing in South Africa's potential. What I would advise for the entrepreneur is that I'm very well. First of all, I don't even know if you need my advice, bro, because I'm proud of you for being an entrepreneur at grade 9 and grade 10. You know, that's certainly the time that you need to start thinking about those things, because what you're doing right now, you don't need any advice. What you're doing right now is that you're honing in on your craft. So whatever it is that you end up studying, you will always have your craft when. So if you're making pants or you're making hats or you're fixing people's computers, whatever it is that you're doing now, you have such a head start from everybody else that will only be learning that trade when they want to now do it to make money from it. You will have been doing it from grade 10. So you don't need any advice, bro. If I would have to give you any advice, I'd just say don't stop.
Great, thank you. There's another one from the Makabeng Hub, one of the ones that is in the chat. So from Khodi Tumelo, should one choose a career because of money or pride?
That's an interesting question because pride is very sustainable. Well, if you know yourself very well. So like the entrepreneur guy that is working on his trade now, he's probably proud that he can do that. So he had some sort of indication that he can do that better than everybody else around him, or he can do it quicker. But there's something, his life experience made him think that, oh, actually, yes, I have a one up on life on this particular thing. And so I'll be an entrepreneur and I'll try to do this thing better. That doesn't mean that that will particularly be his occupation, but one can definitely say that pride had a part to play in him now being an entrepreneur and giving whatever service that he's giving. That's number one. On top of that, I feel money is an important factor. So I knew that I wanted to be independent of my parents, and because of my character and wanting to almost be independent of having to ask them for money, I knew that, okay, actually I should really get a bursary because that's going to make that scenario for me. Because I'm always going against the grain with my decision making, I don't want to have to fight with my parents. They won't fight with me if the things that I want to do that they don't quite believe in or understand will be from my pocket. So it'll be my risk. So then, okay, let me try and make money as quick as I can. Luckily, I got that bursary. So then I didn't have to ask them for money. So anything I did was on me because it was my skin on the line. So there's a two-way thing there. And that's another reason why I definitely was going to go for either medicine or engineering, because those are the two disciplines after you finish with matric, you can immediately get into a job. Right? And so if I can do that, then I won't have to depend on my parents for money at all. While if you're going to be a singer or a DJ or an artist, as much as I love those things, and I think that they're just as important as an accountant or an engineer, you won't likely get a job immediately. You then have to, have a name, market yourself, associate yourself with a gallery or something, but there's a lot of other infrastructure that has to be in place before you can make a name from your art, unlike being a professional. So there's two things to consider there. There's your pride in terms of your talent, which might lead you towards an academic or an artistic qualification and not a professional qualification. And there's the money part, which might lead you towards a professional qualification because you want to have money and you want to go for the job, even if it's not a particularly nice job. Like accounting is, I don't think, a very fun job, but they get paid a lot of money. So if you want to make that trade, then you make that trade. If you're more aligned with your pride and you make art and you're a different kind of person, you connect with the world and with people differently, and you know that if you invest in the art side of your life and that it'll make you money eventually, know that it might take time, but then that's how you make, I'm sorry, that's my dog, that's how you have to make your decision. For me, it was a mixture of those things, but it was a risk. So it was the professional thing because I needed my independence and I wanted to have a job where I wouldn't rely on my parents for money. I also knew that they didn't have money for me to go live back home after that. I had to go get a job. So it was the professional part. Okay, let me go and get this job. With an engineering degree, I'll definitely get a job. But I also knew that having an engineering degree, particularly from Stellenbosch University, gets you the social capital that is required for when people see you, they might say, okay, actually, you know what, maybe you can do more than what your qualification entails. And that's what actually happened with me coming to come do this job, which I wasn't qualified for at all. But the first instant, or let me say the first impression, is that it's an engineering degree from Stellenbosch, which we all know is quite a hostile environment for a Black student, but this guy made it. So that's the first impression to whomever I'm talking to. And then it's the impression that you make on somebody because you're communicating with them and how much you tell them you can offer them in terms of yourself. And then it was what it was, and then I got this job. So I would say that's a difficult one to answer, and I'm making very long what should be a short answer. I would say, depending on your situation, it could be money, it could be pride. If you can afford it, it could be pride. If you can't afford it, it might have to be money, because then you can work on the craft for the pride part of your life later on when you're actually earning a salary from your professional job or whatever it is,
Thanks for that. And I think also I think part of your story is a good lesson that you don't just have one career. So you can have multiple careers. So you can choose different things at different times based on what your needs are and what you're most focused on as an individual. So you don't have to just be, oh no, I'm going to be a doctor only. No, I mean, you have people who left being a doctor and are now comedians because that's where they went, right? So it's an important one.
A friend of mine used to say, just before you continue, a friend of mine used to say, the first two aren't the right ones.
For some of us know that at least one of them is going to be right. So there's been quite a few questions around your friends. There's a few questions I've received about like your girlfriend and how did you cope having like girlfriend and school and all the different commitments. So I almost want to couch it in that is, what are the, so I'm going to be straight with this one, which is, did your girlfriend accept you the way that you were? But beyond just your girlfriend, the friendships that you had, you mentioned some fell away, some continued. Like, did people accept you the way that you are, or were there some challenges based on the different times and the different kind of things that have happened in your life?
I mean, look, when you're going through those things, I mean, I realize now when I tell that story that it sounds like I went through a lot, but it was a hang of a lot of fun, the whole time. And when I look back at it now, some of it looks like, wow, it was 50-50 whether something could have happened or not. But obviously, when I'm in that situation, I don't see it that way. In terms of being accepted for who I was, I mean, I've always never really had a problem with myself, my personality, and my confidence. I've always been very strong on that front, and so I never really struggled with friends. And I mean, I never really lose friends. I think I'm still friends with most people that I've been friends with my whole life. Even that bad crowd from high school, some of them. Although, like the guys in particular in high school that were the bad crowd I was hanging with, maybe I was the bad crowd now. Let me not say they were the bad crowd because I came up with a lot of the ideas, you know. And that bottle that we drank that day, that was me that came up with how we got that bottle, you know. So maybe they weren't the bad crowd. But anyways, so I didn't really struggle with that. And you know, the girlfriend accepting me for who I was. I mean, I wear my heart on my sleeve quite a lot because I'm quite an animated character. So, and I mean, this was somebody that I knew from a long time in high school. We were friends for a long time before we dated. So it wasn't, and you know, the question about balancing studies and you know, life in general, I think you can always do that, but it's very important to have a knack and affinity for reading, okay? Like reading books too, not reading on screens, but reading books from cover to cover. Make that a habit and do that a lot because there are gems in books and not specifically academic things, but just gems of life. There are many books that make me who I am today. As much as the movies make you who you are, man, go read a book. It'll change who you are by the time you get to the cover of it. So I mean, I can't say really how I balance those things, I guess, but I guess I didn't, you know, because if I did balance those things, then I wouldn't have struggled to qualify to become a doctor. Well, not to qualify, but to be accepted in medical school, because I would have spent some of my time doing proper extramural activities and not just hanging out at taverns and drinking and, you know, doing all of those things. Maybe I would have played a little bit of sports. I realized my love for football only after matric, you know, at university. Maybe if I'd played a lot more in high school, I would have realized how much I love playing football.
And this is going to be the last question, and it comes from the DR Hub in Northern Cape, and it's coming from Tandokazi September. And she asks, I'm going to ad lib a little bit about her questions. I think you've answered this a bit. Is what measures have you taken? So how do you give back to your community? That's part one. And part two is what if going back to when you were your past self, that kid in high school, what measures could have been taken by someone to kind of interrupt or to change that behavior?
Look, I got plenty of hidings when I misbehaved. So I don't think there's anything anybody could have done. That was me purely acting out. And I think the worst part of it is that because I was doing okay at school, I don't think anybody could have talked me out of those activities. I think only if I would have gotten, if I had started to fail, would have then thought, wow, this is a big change in my life. Why am I failing? And then, you know, that would have happened that way. But I think because I've always fared well, I never thought that it was a problem to do that. I felt like I was in my right to experiment however I wanted. But I was wrong to think like that because I was in dangerous situations, I'd said before. There was a second part to the question and I forget it now. Could you please just remind me?
Is how do you give back to your community? So what are the
Oh,
things that you do in terms of helping others?
Oh, well, my job is to give back to the community as an innovation manager at the DG Mary Trust. But moreover than that, in my personal capacity, I just try to practice kindness over and above as much as I can. Um, a typical example would be, say, so I also do stand-up comedy in the evenings with some friends of mine here in Cape Town when we're a whole community. So there's one young comedian who's in matric. Okay, so we hang out with him at night, sometimes in clubs, and he'll be performing with us. So he's going to be writing his matric exams this year. And so I'd offered, you know, to kind of mentor him through his exams, but he's also smart. So I actually see a lot of myself in him because he does quite well in a lot of his subjects. Okay, but there's some that he doesn't. But where he does excel, he just does crazy. Like for science, he'll do like 90 something, but then he maybe fail one subject, whatever. And he's hanging out at night with me, so I definitely see myself in him. But tomorrow, because he's also going to be going to the bush in December, he's going to go do the thing to go become a man. Tomorrow we're gonna hang out with him with a couple of comedians here at my place and just chill out with him and kind of, give him advice and talk to him and just make sure that he feels that he has us for whatever questions he may have, or because he's gonna go through something now which is very foreign for anybody to experience. And so us as older guys that have gone through it, we're here for him. So that's an extra act of kindness that I don't have to do in my capacity as a comedian or as somebody that knows him. But I realized that, there's something can happen here. We can be, and it can begin with something like this, but grow into like a mentorship. And because we do understand him to be our younger brother. But when you make activities like this, it really affirms that, and you can create memories built around us supporting our younger brother. And that's important for him, especially so that he knows that he can leverage us. So but I try to do things like that, but I also feel like it's a lifestyle thing, and it's just how you carry yourself. I always say kindness is the ecstasy of feelings. So do that, it'll make you feel good. And maybe that's how I give back to my community. But I don't have an NGO or things like that. But I obviously can't because I'm working for the DG Mary Trust.
Great. I'm going to be turning on the videos in different places. Let's see if we can have people turn on their videos if they can. We've come to the end of the session. And I just want to say thank you so much, Kwanda. I'm hoping I'm also going to get everyone to unmute. So please unmute yourselves. And we all want to hear as loud as you can from wherever you are. So even if we can't see you on video, please give Kwanda, thank you so much for taking time to be with us on a Saturday. Please do take time to let's all applaud Kwanda, the big Enke thank you.
Thank you, 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 thank you.
There we go. So thank you. Like I said, Kwanda, thank you. Your gift is on its way. And I just want to say, Trailblazers, I think there's some great lessons. Please do write down all of the lessons you've learned in your notebooks, and please do share with each other. This will be posted in the Facebook group so that you can refer to it later if you missed some because of technical stuff. But thank you. Thank you so much, Kwanda. Have a wonderful afternoon and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And, I'm more than willing to do this again and again. I love talking to young people, and I'd love to help in any way that I can.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye.
School.
There we go.
Bye.